Bühne frei für Thomas Nowak. Als ich dich gefragt habe, warst du noch, wie heißt das, Sekretär, Direktor, irgendwas, Generaldirektor von der Europäischen Wärmepumpenvereinigung. Das bist du jetzt nicht mehr, aber du bist trotzdem noch im Vorstand da irgendwie tätig, ne? Und das kannst du am besten selber erzählen.
Gerne. Michael, herzlichen Dank. Es ist mir eine immense Freude, hier zu sein, vor allen Dingen, weil ich die Konstanze auch schon ziemlich lange kenne und es mich wirklich freut, dass die Position so hochkarätig besetzt worden ist. Das möchte ich zuerst mal sagen. Ich bin der Industrie seit langem verfallen. Ich bin kein Ingenieur, also sehen Sie mir das nach, wenn da technische Fehler irgendwo auftauchen. Ich hoffe, es sind keine da, aber ich bin kein Ingenieur, aber ich bin trotzdem ein echter Fan der Wärmepumpe. Und letzten Sonntag habe ich mit meinem Vater über dieses Thema gesprochen. Und er hat gesagt, was machst du denn diese Woche? Und dann habe ich gesagt, ja, ich fahre nach Karlsruhe. Achso, ich soll Englisch reden, ne? Okay, my slides are in English, so I should say it in English. So last week, I talked to my father and he said, what are you doing this week? And I said to him, I have the honor to give the opening speech, or one of the opening speeches at the introduction of the chairmanship for heat pumps. And he said, what? That's still necessary? I mean, he listens to me and he listens about heat pumps all the time. But I think he has a point, because we do not have a Jules Verne that told everybody that water is going to be the new fuel. We do, however, have Nicolas Sadi-Carnot, who 200 years ago, so it's actually also very timely too, 200 years after the discovery of the principles, we established a chairmanship to develop it further. He established the concept. And what I found striking about this Jules Verne and him telling everybody that water will be the fuel that we will drive our economies on, the striking part is that he didn't think any further, because in his perspective, it would still be steam engines that would then be driven by water instead of coal. And what I would like to tell you today is that I think that the heat pump will become a commodity. The heat pump will be pervasive and everywhere in our society. So in my opinion, it's high time that we find people that not only look at the technology, but that also embrace it from a social perspective, in stories, maybe in hackathons, maybe in maybe in theater pieces. So what I'm looking for is, will we have eventually somebody that makes the statement of heat pumps are abundant and will be prevailing across our society? I think we are in a good position to hope that this is happening. And here's what I think is happening in parallel at the moment that would lead us to this final conclusion. Heat pumps are understood by now by the majority of the people. The people that don't understand heat pumps at the moment, I think they don't want to understand them. And they often have a reason for that, which is often that they are paid by the incumbent technologies. The benefits are recognized. It's codified in legislation. I will show the slide to that, so don't be afraid. It will be a very, very big slide with a lot of pieces of legislation. We are currently seeing that the heat pumps are mainstreamed across all markets. I'm not only speaking about residential units. Heat pumps are operating in cars, in white goods, in residential, of course, in commercial, industrial applications, and, lo and behold, even in district heating. And apart from the fact that many people tried to put a lot of fear, uncertainty and doubt, in English FUD, into the society and telling a lot of other people that heat pumps can't work, they don't work in their buildings and so on, I think we are seeing that we are demystifying the technology more and faster, and some people in this room have taken an important role there. So I see also parallel action across many sectors and across many pieces of governance, from Europe to the local legislation. Andrea, you mentioned the heat plants. Many of the heat plants I have seen so far built on heat pumps. There's not a lot of other solutions, and despite the fact that Jules Verne talked about water being the new fuel, hydrogen, in my opinion, has no role in these heat plants for end-user heating. So let's start. Here we have the recognition of heat pumps across the board. Heat pumps became a peace technology as a result of the war. I really like this Rewiring America poster because they put it in a very simple picture to say you can do something if you want to become more independent. Simple slogan for action, get a heat pump today. And then, of course, policy recognition is relevant and is very important. We see that what the Americans did by saying we declare this as a technology that we want to support has actually triggered action on the European level. Not because the Europeans wanted the same, but because they were so afraid that all the European industry would just go to the United States, because the support mechanism is so much stronger than it is quite often here. And I cannot dispute that. Then we see there is an action on the European level. Ursula von der Leyen, the current and probably future president of the European Commission, has announced a Green Deal industrial plan. She has declared this her man on the moon, or woman on the moon, if you look at the left picture moment, and she has singled out separate technologies, 5, by now it's many more, I think it's 18 in the final Net Zero Industry Act, but they dared to single out technology. And for a long time you may remember that we were discussing technology neutrality, and so you couldn't pick winners. That was a big slogan, especially of the fossil fuel industry, when they had 75% of fossil heating, and they said you cannot pick a winner and say that heat pumps should have 75% of the industry. Then this all worked into legislation, and don't read it, I will not go through these points. It's just to shock you a little bit to say we are working in an industry where we have to read probably many more legal documents than technical documents in order to comply with all the requirements. And mind you, many people that write these legal texts are not engineers. So quite often the texts are not up to speed if you want to design a product according or based on them. So let's make it a bit more simple. When I started this work, everything was a fight between renewables and energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is easy, everybody understood that, it's taught in industry, in engineering classes, it's even taught in business for production, etc. And so that was the fight. Can we have something that is different than energy efficiency? And of course then the question was, could heat pumps be considered renewable? That was in 2009. Then it trickled over to buildings. Can we make buildings more efficient and use renewable energy? Then we came back to energy efficiency. There was always a piece of legislation behind. And then we drilled down into products, heaters, combi heaters, the components, the pumps, the fans, but also I've heard that in engineering classes, one of the components of a heat pump is the refrigerant, and it's often forgotten because you can't touch it, but it's true, at least I was told. And then we came back, we surfaced again and said, let's now be a bit more structured again, and let's look at strategies. So there was a heating and cooling strategy, well written, didn't do much. There was a system integration strategy, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked pieces of legislation that ever came out of Brussels, because it has a really good set of requirements and asks to the member states on what to do if you want to build an electrified, fully integrated system. And last, we had a heat pump action plan. We pushed for it. The Commission was afraid. Everybody was afraid of the voter that feels nobody should tear your gas boiler out of your basement, and otherwise you will not vote for them. So von der Leyen said, that's too dangerous, I will postpone that. We don't know if it ever comes. And in parallel, then we had the climate law, which now is actually unfolding quite a lot of power because it limits the amount of CO2 that can be emitted to the atmosphere. And then we're going back into the product level, sustainable products, the digital product passport, and that will actually be quite impactful because it mandates the manufacturers to provide data and to make data available that we can then afterwards use to reduce the material demand and energy demand of products. So here I show what happened in parallel, because we had all this legislation happening. The blue curve here shows how the heat pump market grew, largely unaffected by legislation, but fought against hard. Are the heat pumps working? Well, only if they are geothermal. Are they energy efficient or renewables? They are energy efficient, and if you were the energy efficiency department, you would say, no, they are renewables. So it wasn't your topic to talk about. And then it went on. Can they be used in renovation, in multifamily buildings, in old buildings, or only new ones? Do you need a floor heating system? Can they be used in industry? And then at the end game we have now, the heat pump is too expensive, so that's why not everybody can have it, and we have to be careful for poor households. And if that can be overcome, then they will break the electric grids. So even after 200 years, we can conclude the heat pump is still not fit for purpose. And I see Marek here in the audience. I took your fact check, and I also took the work that Jan Rosenau is doing. Two very prominent people that have worked a lot, but we see also that facts don't matter so much. So the heat pump market has developed, and if I just imagine that it continues like it has, and that we conclude that the current year is only a glitch, then we will end up at around 6 million heat pumps per year sold in 2030. And that's what I want to show here. You see the smaller view of this growth trajectory. It was for a long time very, very low, and now we see after about 2016, 1 million units and counting. So also having a good basis makes it easier to increase the numbers. Everybody was super stressed in 2022. All of you that are responsible for production and distribution and selling of these products, you know, because you couldn't get enough products and the end users bought them no matter what. That opened also quite a few doors for Chinese manufacturers because the European manufacturers couldn't deliver. And then everything crashed. So 2023 was a big disappointment, stressed everybody in the same way, just the other way around. But what I give you to think is maybe 2022 was just so extraordinary because of the war and because of taking a lot of the doubts away, and people would still buy a heat pump and want it. And so that was extraordinary, and the normal is what we have in 2023. And if that normal continues, then we have a 15% growth rate, which would actually be quite good as a basis, not sufficient, but good as a basis to then move towards the 6 million, 8 million, or even more that we will need by 2030-35. So I'm optimistic, probably more optimistic than many, but I'm also not responsible on the sales side, so it's easy to say that. But if I look at all the framework conditions that we have, I think that we will see more growth. And why is that? One reason is that despite the fact that you can say the European Commission is maybe a toothless tiger, there are quite ambitious targets. So we have targets for renewable energy. They include a 49% target for renewable heat, and that will be mainly catered to by heat pumps. They include energy efficiency, and they include, from the climate law, a 55% CO2 emission reduction target based on 1990. There is also a proposal, but that's not agreed upon yet, of 90% by 2040. Now you can say, okay, that's another one of these policy things, right? You can't reach the 2030 target, so what do we do about that? We make a more ambitious target, but we push it 10 years out. I do think, however, that these targets are slowly starting to develop an impact in the market. And while we don't see it immediately, and if I ask all of you that are responsible for sales, you would say, no, we don't see it immediately. I do think that there is something coming. And unfortunately, I have to say it didn't come yet, because here I compared, this is Eurostat data, and I compared Eurostat data. The bottom line here is the renewables share in heating and cooling, and you see it's quite insufficient in its growth. At the same time, I compare that to all these legislation pieces that actually benefit, where heat pumps should benefit from. And you see that we have 9 pieces of legislation over 12 years, 14 years, and the impact is negligible. So we need to do a little bit more, I think, because if we continue like this, it will not work. And I'm still optimistic, because then there is another thing that the European Commission has been doing. They said, okay, now we will not talk about green technology anymore and about energy efficiency. We will make another of these stunts. We say by 2050, then we will want to be fully decarbonized. So this is called the Net Zero Industry Act, and we will focus on keeping industry in Europe, on not deindustrializing Europe, but keeping industry on the continent. And we do that by declaring that we want to have 40% of production at least in Europe. I think that's a poor target, because our analysis from EHPA says that we have about 60% today. We want faster permitting, that's good, a simplified framework. We want innovation building in sandboxes. We of course want skills development, so we need probably not one of these professorships, but we need 10, 20, 50, or maybe even 100 across Europe. So you are only the start, and I'm happy that University of Stuttgart copies it, and I hope that many other people will copy it. What they also say, and that's quite striking, 6 times as many heat pumps. Now you can ask yourself, and there I'm enough of a scientist to say, so what's the basis of that? I couldn't really find that. It's maybe an IEA report that has stated the similar statement. So then 6 times what? 6 times today's sales. That means 3 million per year. Do we want 18 million per year? That would mean we double the heating market. Or are we saying, okay, 22 million installed heat pumps across Europe, we want to do 6 times that, then we would end around at around 132 million. That would mean we move completely to heat pumps. Another thing that they don't dare to say. But in their analysis and in their impact assessment, the development trajectory is quite clear. So this is my boy on the moon moment, and I had to do something with AI. So it's a self-generated picture of a boy watching the stars that will align for heat pumps. And Then I think next to all of these things, if I conclude that maybe we are too ambitious on policy and we're not doing enough, but what we see is that there is a parallel development in society, and I wanted to call it a megatrend electrification. I think the right word is it's a revolution. Because the electrification that we see today, a strong support for photovoltaic systems, a strong support for batteries and business models behind it. So there's money flowing in these directions, supported by electric vehicles, happening everywhere apart from Germany. So if you read the German news, you think electric vehicles are not happening. Everybody else laughs about that because they are selling. And I read last week that the German electric vehicle manufacturers are the biggest manufacturers after China. So it's BYD, then all the Germans, then only the United States. The German policymakers seem to miss that point. If you put this together, and then you have heat pumps on top of it, then it makes sense out of a sudden to talk about buildings as integrated nodes in a highly integrated grid between thermal and electric energy vectors. And I think if you start with photovoltaic, you will have too much electricity. So you think, do I sell that for 10 cents? No, I want to use it. Do I buy a battery? Do I buy a heat pump? Do I buy an electric vehicle? These are logical consequences. And you can start at any of these points. I think you will always end in the end in having all the solutions together. Let's see, so a little bit of time. And I'm close to the end. Because the other thing that's happening is the fossil incumbent, the oil and gas boilers of this world, and in some parts of Europe even the coal ovens, they become less and less attractive. Germany has a CO2 price already in the Brennstoffhandelsgesetz. Europe will get one in 2027. It's called the ETS 2 because there is an ETS 1 already for big energy users. It will be supported by a social climate fund. So we will take money from the first ETS and finance actions so that poorer households can be supported in shifting to heat pump technology and others before they will have to pay the costs for oil and gas becoming more expensive. The interesting thing also is Germany was very careful in putting this up and declared that we will fix the price for the ton of CO2 that comes out of oil and gas use. Europe is not doing that. In Europe, the current proposal, inflation corrected, says that we will start with about 53, 55 euros per ton, and then this will all be traded in the market. There's not going to be any free allowances, so the full impact of the CO2 emission trading for households could hit everybody in Europe. Of course, then we will discuss how to solve it for the poorer households, but at least it's foreseen as a real trading system where demand and supply define the price. Then we could do an taxation reform, energy taxation directive, that needs unanimity. Is very unlikely to happen because we still have a lot of member states that do not want to touch the topic. Fossil fuel subsidies have been declared many times by G7 and G20. They need to be phased out basically yesterday, and then it's not happening, but I see at least that the pressure is increasing. The electricity to gas price ratio would make, if it's properly low, it would make a heat pump purchase a heat pump investment, and then people could talk about saving money with the heat pump instead of feeling that they are burdened with buying it. We say that it should be a value around 2. The German association says 2.5. I think anywhere somewhere in that area we will make money with heat pumps, so then more people will buy. Then an interesting thing that is typically not touched by any of us, the EU taxonomy. Because if you are a company that gets money from investment funds, then the investment funds, they are judged by if they invest into taxonomy compatible areas. So if you do heat pumps, your investment is compliant. And that's something where I see at the moment quite a pressure. I've also talked to the EIB and quite a lot of the other financial actors in that market. They all confirm there is going to be more pressure from the financing sector. Then the incumbent fossil gas, fossil oil cannot meet the cooling demand, so we need to press the heating and cooling benefit of heat pumps much more, I think. And then there's also the simple solution. We simply ban fossil fuels because they have a negative impact. They pollute the air, they are not good for our health. And some member states are doing that. We have made, as EHPA still, an overview of which member states of the European Union are banning oil and gas, some in new builds, some in old builds, some for all buildings, some only oil, some only gas. But you know, there is more and more evidence that people will not kill you if you do it. And a policymaker wants to do one thing not, and that's a mistake. So if you have somebody that has done it and is still in power, then it's a good precedent for other people to copy. This will result, and that's another thing that I think is not talked about enough, this will result in what I call the gas squeeze out, and I'm taking a slide from Agora Energiewende here, and they have looked at it and they say that if we do all these things, then we will have an increase in the costs for gas grids, and less people will find that attractive. And less people will want to use gas. So who is remaining? The people that can't move. And that's why it's so important to touch upon social housing renovation and touch upon building renovations where the poorer people live. So that's, I think, this will increase in pressure for everybody. So it's another point that will make it less and less attractive to use gas and oil boilers. And then I think, if I look around, we are probably all old enough to still remember that people smoked, even in trains and planes and bars. And that's no longer socially acceptable. And I dare say, we will probably see the same. If 7 out of 10 people have a heat pump, what will the last 3 say? You will not talk about it anymore. You will probably be ashamed of yourself that you didn't shift. You will find a lot of excuses why you didn't do it. But the less excuses there are, the bigger the pressure will be on you to change the way you do it. And I thought this is a very nice, you should check this on YouTube. It's an activity in the United States. They make heat pump parties. Those of you old enough, you have attended Tupperware parties, or your mothers for that matter most of the time. Sometimes your fathers if they were a bit more enlightened. And they are doing heat pump parties. So you invite your friends and you say, I have a new heat pump, do you want to see it? Can I show it to you? You want to take a shower? It's still the same temperature, imagine. So, with that, I come to a close. I am convinced that the future heat pump will be a commodity. It has to be addressed in lyrics and prose and movies and technology because it will be everywhere. It will be smaller, it will be more modular, it will provide heating and cooling. It will probably provide higher and lower temperatures. So this is addressing mainly the industrial applications. It will be multi-source. Why use only air or only water? Why not have something that is a multi-source heat pump? I see Constanze nodding because she has worked a lot on that topic and some other people too. It will be connected. I think we should look more into closing energy cycles because we can have a society that uses much less energy than it does today. It will be smarter and more system integrated. And lastly, if we want to make it cheaper, it has to be much easier to install. So we have to look at, and there was a new project by I think Termondo where they say we will look at all the heat pumps that we are installing and we will ask how can we install them faster. So with that, Constanze, my very best wishes for your work, for the professorship. Congratulations. I think we can plant a small seed and I hope that we will see a lot of sunflowers in thoughts and in metal on the ground. All the best for this new initiative.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And I don't know if there are questions. We are right now just in time, so maybe you can ask the questions to Thomas in the break. While Björn is getting ready, I would like to thank you very much for attending. And I remember our very first exchange on LinkedIn, and you were writing that, oh, the world needs F-gases, the world needs F-gases. And I told you, no, for heat pumps, I don't think the world needs F-gases. And
it's really true. This is also a good, it's actually quite a compliment to you because we had quite a heated discussion. And obviously I was in a field that was a bit out of my realm, I think, because Michael knows so much more about that than I do. What I have said, and I still stick to that, before we allow people to install gas boilers, I would any day accept that we install a heat pump with a refrigerant that we don't like so much today. And then I've also said that all the time, wherever you can use non-fluorinated refrigerants, do so.
Yes, and now you can read how to do it.
Yeah.